Coming up next, approaching sales as partnerships. How trade show organizers should make partnerships rather than sales. With Raoul Monks, Chloe Richardson, and Duncan Custerson. Raoul is the founder of Flume Sales Training and is driven by helping businesses navigate their way through this crisis in the strongest way possible. He is a regular speaker at industry events and recently led a series of Flume webinars which attracted several thousand event professionals. He writes a regular column in Exhibition News called Closed One. Flume work with companies to put teams into the head of their clients to create the most powerful sales and marketing approaches possible. They are well known in the events industry for their focus on driving measurable sales impact through the training they provide. Chloe is an exhibition and trade show sales expert and owner of Asir Events, a company that creates, develops, coaches, and executes exhibition-specific commercial strategies, including how to maximize commercial communications with your exhibitors and sponsors. A multilingual sales leader with clients all over the globe, Chloe has always believed that tech can be the cherry on the solution-based sales cake. Duncan is the event director for International Confex, the exhibition where the events industry meets. Duncan is intrinsically involved in the partnerships, collaborations, and decisions that drive positive change and progress for the exhibition. He is responsible for keeping the show innovative and exciting, as well as educational in its content. Commercially, his direction has generated a 32% revenue increases over the last 2 years since coming on board, as well as steady year-on-year delegate rise. Duncan's background is rooted in sales, having starting his career at EMAP and working across an array of publishing online and event sales.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone out there. Thank you so much for joining us for the last session today. Thank you to Engage Virtual, and thank you also to MASH Media for making this possible. It's been an amazing event so far. My name is Raoul Monks. I'm founder and director of Flume Sales Training, a self-confessed sales geek, and I'm here to talk with you guys. When I say you guys, I mean the two people sitting next to me, which is Duncan, and also we've got Chloe Richardson, and I'll talk a tiny bit about them in a minute before I get them chatting about a really important area, which we're here today to talk about: approaching sales as partnerships and how trade show organisers should make partnerships rather than just sales. And it's all going to be about the approach we should use, looking at long-term relationships and why that's so crucial today. Couple of things before I introduce the two absolutely gorgeous and brilliant people who are on this with us today. I want to get you guys as involved as possible. So if you're in the audience right now, then I'd love you to have a think about anything you want to ask. Put the questions into the chat and I will do my best to feed them into these gurus next to me as we go through to get some up to the minute cutting edge answers for you, and hopefully you can do some stuff with this straight after and go away and use some of these principles that they can share. So please have a think about what you want to find out, feed it in. We've already got a question coming in right now and I'll do my best to feed it out to these guys. So let me just introduce the panel. We have first off Duncan Custerton, who is, I'm going to read this to make sure I get it 100% right, although I do know both of these guys very well. So cross-platform sales specialist, starting his sales career at EMAP. Duncan has worked in BD roles for over 16 years and now is an event director for International Confex. Duncan has spearheaded the reputational and commercial growth of the exhibition for event organisers. Duncan also makes a mean carbonara. We've also got here Chloe Richardson, who is a multilingual event sales specialist, owner of Asir Events. Is that pronounced right?
Asir, but almost, yeah.
Asir, so okay, one step at a time. So she's also head of sales at Giant Health. Chloe's been working in events since age 19, and the days right now working on commercial projects with an emphasis on customer communication and long-term relationship. Chloe can also peel banana skins with her feet.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we're going to be finding out a lot more about these guys, and not just about the world of sales and partnerships, but also some more depth into the carbonara and the bananas. So what I'm really keen to do is just get the conversation going. We're talking here right now about partnerships and how approaching sales right now in the right way is so crucial with such a volatile and tough industry at the moment. Maybe we can start with yourself, Chloe, in terms of why this area in particular is so important to you personally. Why is this partnerships big on your agenda? And also, what does it mean for you? Like partnerships, what does that actually mean? Because I think we need to define the title really.
Mm-hmm. Hi, well, thank you for the lovely introduction. Yes, really good question to start off with. And I think we need to really note that partnerships is all about working with your customers towards their common goal and supporting your customers to achieve it. And it is a type of sales. It's a type of sales that has been going on for decades. But the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because even pre-COVID-19, I was going into organisers and associations all around the world and saying to them, we need to be doing more solution-based selling, because that's what partnerships are, right? So we need to be moving away from this square meter model and into selling our events and our portfolios as a solution so we can work with our customers to reach their end goal, because I truly believe that is the secret sauce behind long-term commercial partnerships. So that's why it's particularly important for me.
Love it. Duncan, what's your take?
Yeah, Chloe, well put. I couldn't really echo that any better. But I think, in sales, we're always learning as individuals, and whatever level we're at. So I'm particularly interested in getting involved with any session like this. But I'm pretty adamant that the best salespeople that I've ever worked with, generating the highest levels of revenue and the most importantly, repeat business and continuing to make long-term connections, are approaching sales with this level of mutuality, a kind of win-win approach to selling. They're understanding the client's needs, they're finding a solution, and they're building trust through that process, and then rinse and repeating. I think partnerships should underpin absolutely everything we do as salespeople, and hence why I'm kind of interested in this subject.
Yeah, and I think it's a massively important area, especially right now. It's interesting you just said, Chloe, as well, that it's something you've always kind of talked about, but we will talk in a minute about why now in particular. I'm keen just to tap into something that you both talked about there, which is kind of, you talked about mutual benefit, Chloe, and kind of working towards a mutual goal. And that's what I've always thought about it, is you need to have a collaborative goal with someone to be able to partner with them. You need to have the same end goal. Can you just tap into that a tiny bit more? Like what does this excellence in partnerships look like right now? What does this beautiful relationship, what should it be like?
Really good question. I think obviously it depends on the customer and the relationship and the individual circumstance, but I think there's one model which you can transfer over every single circumstance, and that is, if you talk to your clients and if you understand what they're trying to achieve, how they expect to achieve it, and the resources they have to get there, then effectively that's all you need to be able to map out, okay, that's my customer's goal. What can we do to make sure they get there? Because if they don't get there, we're not doing our job right, and they won't come back and work with us next year. So that's why it's mutually beneficial, because if your customer is happy, if they've achieved what they set out to achieve, then in theory, that means that they'll come back year after year, which is about that long-term goal that also Duncan alluded to. And I think it's important that if we don't have that discovery piece before we bring on a new client, we're never going to know what their goals are. So how do we know if we've achieved or not? And I see that repeatedly. People don't know what their customers are trying to achieve, so therefore they can't say we've delivered, what next? So I think that partnership is about getting there together based on your customer's goal, which therefore supports your goal of getting them back year after year and growing that commercial partnership.
Duncan, anything to add on that? I've got a few thoughts as well, actually, I'd like to tap in with, but I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, it's not an argument, Chloe. I think taking a step back, we're in a real kind of on-demand world right now. It's very much a buyer's world, and we make decisions for ourselves, and no one really wants to be told or sold to or told what to do. And if there's pressure to buy, I think we pull away. Personally, if I'm told what to do, I pretty much do the opposite. So I think marketeers, in the same way, don't want to be told how to do their jobs. They're professionals at buying, so they're cautious, particularly of new business salespeople. They're skeptical, and no more so than right now in this climate. So for me, I think partnership selling is about kind of switching from kind of just pushing your idea onto a client and thinking you've got a solution that's going to fit, to sort of guiding them to discovering it on their own. Because if it becomes their idea, they're much more likely to kind of trust it because it's theirs, believe in it, and get excited about working with you on it. So it's a subtle shift, but I think a really important one.
Can I just add to that? Sorry, Roel, I know you've got something to add as well, but just from what Duncan said there, it's a really good point, actually. And I say this to all of my sales teams. If you have started to pitch before you have sat down and noted every single thing you can about your prospect, what they need, what they want, how they're going to get there, you've lost it. It's too late. So you shouldn't say a word until you understand everything about them, and then you pitch your solution. So many ready-made solutions now are being presented without listening. And I think that's a problem we need to get away from. So true.
I mean, I've woe betide anybody who comes off of a sales call in any of my teams and doesn't understand what the client does. So what is it they do? Oh, I'm not actually sure. Oh, but
not again.
Pitch them.
Love it. So I'm keen on just tapping into something you mentioned, because the way that I kind of look at partnerships within the events industry and any other really in terms of a sales relationship is that long-term bit. And I think I find that quite interesting, tapping into that phrase, because Chloe, you mentioned earlier about solution selling, but we also talked about long-term. And with the training we do at Flume, a lot of the stuff we do around account growth is to really set long-term goals with your client. And what we mean by long-term is not just 2 days past the event. We're talking about like 3 years in the future, and knowing their growth plans, knowing where they are against those, knowing how they're going to get there, and working together with them. Is that, I don't mind who goes for this, but is that what you mean by long-term, or are you kind of talking, what sort of timescales do you see this as?
I mean, personally, I'll just jump in because I've got a quick answer. I think anything kind of 5 year plus, I would see as a long-term partnership with an exhibition and a customer. I would go, 5 years above.
Yeah. So let's move on to why now. So right now, there's so many things that have changed. One of the, I think, things that's impossible to ignore is that maybe what clients would accept from a sales experience pre-COVID is quite different from what they expect and need right now. And it's ultimately got tougher for them to make decisions and to buy and to work with salespeople and to work with event organisers. So what's your take on the importance now? What happens if you don't go down this route? Really keen to kind of get your take as to the urgency on this matter. Duncan, maybe you could kick us off on this one.
Yeah, I think, from an organiser perspective, we're kind of faced with two pretty difficult decisions right now, whether to go live, whether to go virtual, or whether to do something somewhere in between. So, if you're selling live, there's a level of uncertainty around whether that can actually take place. I'm certainly undergoing that myself. And if you're selling virtual, there's a level of uncertainty as to whether or not you can get the level of engagement that you want and the number of people through the doors, as it were. So for me, I think one of the most important things is operating with a level of transparency, taking your clients, your prospects on a journey with you so that they understand the process that you're going through, so that they can get bought into the solution. And that solution needs to be long term, because we're going through a process that's got an indefinite end date. So it's about working with them, their needs, and trying to look that bit further into the future than we ever have done.
Okay. Chloe, what have you got to add on that one?
Well, I suppose if we're asking ourselves, is it more important now to have this relationship-based selling than it was 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago? I would answer no, it's not more important now. I think, and slightly controversially perhaps, I think as an industry, which we are all part of and we all love very much and we all want to see develop, I think we have to be frank and truthful and say it was always important, but we have found a way to avoid facing the importance of this issue because we have found models that focus on selling square meters. And that is a fact. And I think for us, the best thing, and probably the only good thing that's come out of COVID-19, is that we have had to face up to the fact that we should be selling partnerships. We should do partnership-based consultative sales. And we haven't been. And it's always been important, but now we can't escape it. And I think we need to remember budgets are going to be slashed for the next few years. Now is the time to demonstrate to our customers that that they can have trust in us, that we understand their businesses and what they're going through. And we need that customer loyalty. And that is why we can't shy away from this now. And we need to really embrace the fact that we're going to have to work harder on building these relationships so that we do get that repeat business, because there's a lot of reasons now and excuses for them to not give us any money and not work with us. So we need to give them every reason why they should. And that's why we now have to do what we should have been doing for the last decade, I think. Controversially, I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. Anything to add?
I think that makes sense. I think that makes perfect sense. And I think the one thing, I guess, the virtual, this virtual world that we're moving into kind of brings into play is 365ing your events, making sure that they are platforms for levels of engagement throughout the year, whether that's launching a webinar series, simple old school newsletters, or creating a 365 or 360 digital version of your event to extend the shelf life of it. There's lots of ways to do it, and of course going fully virtual or hybrid are some of those, but it's about what that then offers your client in return.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a couple of questions coming in actually, so I'm going to feed these in, but I'm going to ask a next question from myself and then feed in a question from Madeline in a minute. And actually, there's another one coming in a moment as well, which I'll get in there too. So, with all of this talk about partnerships and long term, and obviously with everything going on right now in terms of the volatility and the uncertainty out there in the events industry, what does this mean for short-term sales? Does this mean that if we go for the partnership approach, that long-term approach, we're not going to be expecting or able to bring in those short-term sales? Let's start with Duncan. You're ready to talk, I can see.
No. I think if we're operating properly as a partnership, it actually opens up the opportunity to embrace short-term sales, because you've built those relationships, you've built that trust, and you've shown that you want to work across a long period with these clients because you trust that you can deliver a solution for them. And there's nothing better than that kind of window of opportunity where you say, hey, this has just come across my desk, it's really exciting, and I'm coming to you first because we've worked in partnership together over the years, and you now trust that hopefully I can offer you a solution that's worked for you in the past. This one's new, it's exciting, and it's just happened. And guess what? Because it's perhaps something a little bit unknown, like virtual, the price is quite good too. So I think it actually opens a whole new forum to be to make it more possible to have shorter term sales. But of course, we want to think long term.
Can I ask a quick question? When we're saying short-term sales, do we mean as in a quick sales cycle, or do we mean a sales relationship that we only see lasting a year?
Yeah,
How are we defining that?
Good question. Really good question. I suppose what the question means is that if we're talking about 5 years, 3 years, and setting goals for that sort of timescale with the client and working closely with them to get them there, then does that mean that in the next month or 2 months, we can't really expect to be seeing any money or revenue from those clients?
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think there's a common misconception that partnership selling has to be long-winded and has to take 6 months. It doesn't at all. I mean, I'm working on Giant Health at the moment, which is a virtual event. First year we've gone virtual, 6th year of the show. I've got a sales team of 10, and we've been working on it since September, and we've sold multiple contracts based on having a conversation that takes half an hour, understanding their business, and they've signed the next day. I've had some calls that have come in one evening and they've signed by 9 o'clock the next morning, because as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't have to be a lengthy process. It just needs to be thorough and make sure that I've understood exactly what they need and how we're going to get them there. And also, for some of them, they might just need one event, and that might be the end of their relationship with us. And that's the great thing about partnership sales. I'm not going to sell a 10-year partnership to somebody who doesn't need it, and because that'd be pointless for both of us. But some people might just need to have a big injection, come 1 year and have a great display, and then step back. Absolutely fine as well. So I think partnership sales are so good because it can be anything as long as it's what the customer needs.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as you've gone through that needs analysis process, then ultimately you understand what it is they're trying to achieve out of it, and that partnership is the achievement. And like you say, that could be just one show, or it could be a
lifetime
relationship. Exactly.
Yes, forever.
Couldn't agree more.
What's your thoughts on whether you should be open about the fact that's the sort of relationship you want with a client? Should you tell them up front that the way that you work is that I believe in, if it gets results for you, then it's going to be good for me, and this is how I work with my clients, and go into that? Have you done that? Have you seen that? Chloe, do you do that with your team?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I kind of move away from the stuff I'm doing with Giant Health and focus really on my clients, so exhibition organisers are traditionally my clients and have been for the last few years, I say to every single person right at the start, let's have a chat, let's see what you need, and we'll see if I can help. And probably 40% of those times I say, actually, I don't think I'm the right person for this, and I'll direct them to somebody that is, because it's about reputation as well. If you take on an event or a customer or a project that you can't actually fulfill, and you know that deep down, and I think a lot of people in the events industry have been guilty of this in the past, you are going to damage your reputation for years and you can't take that back. Whereas if we're totally honest, that is what's going to make sure that we grow commercially as organisers for the next few decades. So I think I think you should be upfront. I don't know, Duncan, do you agree?
I completely agree. I think transparency is absolutely vital to any partnership, whether it's personal or business. So if they know, if you lay out your stall that you're ultimately trying to satisfy their needs, and you can get under the bonnet of what it is they're trying to achieve out of your relationship, then either you find that solution for them or somebody else in your department, depending on what your business structure is like, may well be able to. And it could be a case of, look, I'm not the right person for this.
Yeah.
So that partnership could be just a referral to somebody who is.
And I think it's having that respect and that self-confidence to be able to say, this isn't the right thing for you. And as salespeople, we've had it drummed into us for decades that actually, no, you have to say yes, you have to take every penny you can from every different angle. But actually, that doesn't make us credible partners. So I think it's important for people to remember that you can say no if it's not the right thing, and you don't have to pretend it's going to work for somebody if it's not, because that's going to damage your reputation more than anything else.
I agree. And I think there's something very powerful about actually disagreeing with a potential prospect, and letting them know that, while you respect their opinion, you don't feel that the solution that they're going after is right, and you won't sell it to them.
Yeah, and your solution better than them, don't you, right? So you know their needs, you know your solution, bring it together, and it's a marriage made in heaven. That's all we want.
We've got a 5-minute warning. I've got a question, Madeline. So let me read this one out, and whoever wants to go for it, go for it. So Madeline has asked, do you have any tips on how to be flexible to your customers/sponsors' needs and not being too flexible and possibly not having the resources to deliver anything? So I'll read that again. Do you have any tips on how to be flexible to your customers/sponsors' needs and not being too flexible and possibly not having the resources to deliver anything? So basically, flexing too much where you can't actually deliver. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we're undergoing this a little bit at the moment because we're operating a trade show that's, we've just moved our dates, and we've just added various elements of inventory, kind of like the 365 thing I'm talking about, of adding new platforms to our proposition. So one of the ways we're tackling the kind of problem of flexibility around, will the show run, won't it, will it become virtual, it is actually bolstering on value to our core proposition, which will always be live. So the partnership approach of having a number of inventory types, whether it's a run of webinars, a newsletter, and say a presence at the live show, we've broken that down into a kind of tiered route, a crescendo towards a live show. So we say, okay, well, come on board with us. This is the big picture. This is what we'd love to do. Let's talk hypothetically first. Let's work out a plan that leads you towards a live show, because that's what I ultimately am selling here, and break down the payment terms in the lead up to that, because at each point and each month you're receiving some level of value exposure to an audience and a community that we're working with. But let's share the risk a little bit. And work together on, those payment terms and a potential break clause. Because if we do get to a point where actually a live event can't take place, and you don't feel as comfortable in the solution perhaps that we've put on the table, you've still received the value from the early part of the relationship. But let's call it a day now. So it just allows us all to keep our lights on.
Fantastic. Okay. So Duncan, you're posed in a really dramatic, amazing position right now, but we can hear your voice, which is great. So don't, I quite like it. What about you, Chloe, in terms of...
Okay, so flexibility. So I'm going to address it in a slightly different way to Duncan. And I think my aim is always to be flexible in terms of actually creating potential packages for sponsors and exhibitors. And the way that I tend to do that is to have something internally that we use with a big list of opportunities and an internal price against how much that actually costs us to deliver and costs us to make, and do we have the capabilities. So we get that list signed off, that little wee spreadsheet, and then that means that when sales staff are talking to potential customers, they are going back after they've understood what they need and how the partnership can be built, and they are putting something together that is a total clean slate, and they're putting things into that package based on what they know about the exhibitor. And what that means is that they can be totally flexible. It's not a case of we've got 3 possible packages, and so the internal team know the prices of each individual element, but they present it as a finalized package to present to the prospect as and when. I like Duncan's pose. I want to do that as well.
Have I not moved yet?
No.
You're now in fog. It's
nice.
quite impressive. It's like you're going to a snowstorm, but it's all good. We can hear you, and you've got dulcet tones. So I want to keep going. We've got one more question that I'm going to get out there. We've only got about 1 minute 30. So headline points would be fab. Duncan, let's start with you because you look really excited about this one. I can see by your hands. So the question is around what support the people need. So in terms of the sales teams, what support is necessarily internally to help deliver this kind of partnership approach? Does marketing need to get involved? Content, like how do they need to work, or is it just salespeople have to do it all on their own?
It's a really good question. I think if we're talking specifically, since we're on a session about tech, if we're talking specifically about virtual, I think people really need to believe in what they're selling right now, and it's uncharted territory for a lot of us. Virtual events are new to many of us, so I think the key thing for me would be a really strong relationship with your provider. Having demos not just for the heads of department, for the entirety of the team, and allowing them to really understand what it is they're selling, because the platform is ultimately an extension of your brand and your business. So they really need to get behind it. Chloe.
Great.
Let's get Chloe.
Thanks. Okay, so I will add to that and I'll talk about other interdepartmental relationships really quickly. I am of the strong belief, slightly again controversially, that every single person in a business, whether it's ops, marketing, accounts, finance, HR, are all part of the value chain that supports the salesperson bringing in that revenue at the end of the day. Therefore, I think to make sure that everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet and developing these packages that support relationship-based sales, they should all be earning KPIs and they should all get bonuses depending on the support they've given, which has ended up with a sale. And that's
nice.
What I think. And every exhibition organizer should implement that as of tomorrow.
Wow, boom. Right, we're all going to do Duncan's pose here and say, woo, we've done well. We're right on the end, so we're going to have to close down. It's been a fascinating conversation. There's a couple of questions and points people have put out there, which we'll try and tackle afterwards. Megan Powell's just said, boom. We've got Helen Harlow saying, yes, Duncan, you guys have got some great fans out there who are supporting you all the way. Some brilliant points. Partnerships are the way forward. Now is a time we have to do it. We always should have been doing it, but it's the future for both you and your clients. Thank you so much, Chloe. Thank you so much, Duncan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a great evening and enjoy the carbonara and the bananas.
Thanks, Raoul.
Take care, guys. Thanks, Raoul.